unfold.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. This is the show where we take a monumental stack of sources, the articles, forecasts, historical texts, you name it, and we distill it all down.
All the way down to the most crucial, insightful nuggets you need. We're not here to skim the surface.
No, not at all. We're here to connect the threads, the ones that seem disparate, between history, cosmology, and, hard future data.
And today, we are aiming that intellectual spotlight at a year that has, frankly, already generated a lot of buzz, a lot of structural anxiety across forecasting communities. We are talking about 2026.
That's right. Our core topic for this deep dive is 2026, or, as it's known in East Asian cosmology, the year of the fire horse Bingwu.
And this is a once every 60-year event. What's so startling, and this is what jumped out from all the research, is how modern data forecasting
In AI and climate?
in AI, climate volatility, geopolitics,
Yeah.
it all aligns almost eerily with the ancient cultural fear around this specific cycle.
So our mission today, it's sort of a dual methodology.
It has to be. We've synthesized cultural anthropology to really dissect the historical impact of the fire horse mythos. And you are going to hear about a shocking, completely voluntary demographic shift in Japan in 1966.
And we've combined that with hard future forecasting. We're applying that historical archetype as a kind of high-level heuristic for high volatility trends.
And let's be absolutely clear for you, the listener.
Yeah, this is important. Our premise is not deterministic prophecy. We are not saying that ancient texts can perfectly predict the Dow Jones.
Not at all. We're asking a different, I think, a much deeper question. How often does the ancient zeitgeist, the way these cultures codified periods of extreme disruption, how often does that synchronize with measurable, observable, macroscopic shifts?
Is the fire horse, a recurring algorithm of disruption that history just seems to run on a 60-year loop?
And based on the historical data and the modern projections we've pulled together, the forecast for 2026 suggests a period defined by what's called yang blade energy.
Yang blade.
It's a configuration of excessive fire and a kind of cutting action. This energy is sharp, it's severing, and it's capable of enacting sudden, rapid, and often irreversible change.
So we're going to unpack exactly what that blade energy means for technology, for the climate, and for global stability.
And we're going to start right at the source. The mechanics of the cycle itself.
Okay, let's unpack this structural foundation. We have to start with the basis of time in this system, which is the sexagenary cycle.
Right.
A lot of people know the 12-year animal zodiac cycle, the horse, the goat, the monkey. But this system, the Ganzi, it's so much deeper, so much more complex.
Exactly. The foundation of East Asian chronology uses this really elegant permutation structure. It's a 60-year calendar cycle.
60 years.
And it's the result of combining two independent lists. You have the 10 heavenly stems, the Tiangan, which relate to macro elements, yang wood, yang fire.
And the 12 earthly branches, the Dizi.
Which relate to the zodiac animals, but they also contain their own elemental energy.
So you pair the first stem with the first branch, second with the second, and you just keep cycling through.
You keep going until the two lists align again, which happens precisely every 60 years. But that also means not every stem gets to meet every branch.
And that's the genius of it, right? It creates these specific, sometimes very rare combinations of energy.
And 2026 lands on the 43rd combination in this cycle.
Yeah.
That combination is Bingwu.
Bingwu.
And this is where the convergence of energy just becomes overwhelmingly potent. You have fire sitting directly on top of fire.
Fire on fire. Okay, so let's analyze those components. What does the heavenly stem Bing, what does that bring to the party?
So Bing is yang fire.
Yeah.
But it's yang fire in its most expansive radiant form. It is the sun.
The sun.
Think global daylight, total illumination, massive expansion. On the good side, it symbolizes visibility, openness.
And on the bad side.
On the negative, it represents a ruthless, scorching heat that affects the whole macro environment, the public perception. There's just nowhere to hide when Bing is the heavenly stem.
And then sitting right underneath the sun, we have the earthly branch, Wu, the horse.
The horse is the quintessential engine of momentum and speed.
Yeah.
But more importantly, Wu is the cardinal animal of the South.
And the south is the direction of
Pure, unadulterated fire. And on top of that, the horse branch itself contains a hidden stem, Ding, which is yin fire, like a furnace fire.
So let me get this straight. We have the sun, Bing, radiating yang fire. It's sitting on the horse, Wu, which is cardinal fire and also contains a furnace fire.
Exactly.
Okay, that's where the extreme intensity comes from.
It creates what our sources call a double fire structure. It represents the absolute zenith of active, rapid energy.
So this is not a year of careful planning.
No, it's a year of explosive action.
Yeah.
And this configuration is why it's so often described in the more esoteric branch of Bazi astrology as a yang blade or goat blade configuration.
We mentioned that term earlier, but let's slow down and really define it. What is the archetype of the yang blade? Is it really just about heat?
Not at all. I mean, the heat is part of it, but the yang blade is an aggressive, martial configuration.
Martial.
It's sharp, it's severing, it's military in nature. It implies irreversible change, a situation where problems aren't resolved through, compromise.
They're resolved by cutting them away.
By cutting them away. It suggests risk, violence, intense competition where boundaries are tested and broken, often through military or, highly polarized confrontational means.
So this isn't a gentle correction.
This is a necessary, dramatic severing to clear the way for whatever comes next.
So if 2026 is defined by this yang blade of double fire, what does that much aggressive, excessive energy do to the overall elemental balance of the globe?
And that is the core vulnerability. In the 5-element system, everything has to be in balance.
Right.
So complete dominance of fire, the energy of intensity, speed, it leads by definition to a profound deficiency of water.
And water is always associated with wisdom, diplomacy, flow, cooling down volatile situations.
Correct. So the lack of water in the global chart implies a world temperament that is intrinsically hot-headed.
Impulsive.
Very impulsive decision-making, a widespread lack of patience, and, critically, the breakdown of diplomatic cooling channels. When crises arise, the world will just struggle to find the flow or wisdom, the water, to negotiate a peaceful outcome.
Every interaction is prone to inflammation.
Exactly.
Okay, let's go through the elements one by one because this deep dive is all about connecting that ancient model to modern reality, starting with fire itself since it's just overwhelming the system.
Right, so fire amplified. With Bingwu energy, we're forecasting literal manifestations of heat, extreme heat waves, intense solar flares, volcanic activity,
Societally.
inflammatory, highly polarized politics, debates that just rapidly devolve into confrontation, and massive acceleration in technology, especially AI.
And the markets.
Oh, absolutely. Accelerated asset bubbles, extreme volatility in the stock market, a boon built on pure, unconstrained optimism and speed.
Now for the inverse, water. The element being boiled away by all this heat.
Water, evaporated deficient. The metaphysical implications here are, frankly, grim. Droughts, conflicts over access to increasingly scarce water.
And you mentioned flow, so logistics.
Very tangibly, the breakdown of global logistics and flow. Water governs shipping and transport. If diplomatic channels or even natural channels dry up, supply chains just seize. Think major global bottlenecks in shipping lanes or vital waterways.
Okay, on to metal. In the cycle, fire conquers metal. It forges or melts it.
Metal, forging, melting. And that action translates directly to structural stress. Metal represents currency, financial structures, so we anticipate a massive transformation in currencies.
Crypto, gold.
Crypto, gold, being melted down and reformed into new standards. But more worryingly, metal also represents weaponry and the military. The yang blade suggests significant military conflict.
And in the body.
It relates to the lungs and respiratory health. Think about the effect of widespread smoky air from extreme wildfires.
Right. And earth. Fire produces earth in the form of ash, but too much fire, like a relentless sun, it just scorches it.
Earth, scorched. Scorched earth leads to agricultural stress. We see the potential for dust bowls, crop failures from heat and drought, and even seismic instability.
And earth also represents stability and boundaries.
So the excessive fire could violently expose structural flaws in institutions that rely on being grounded, forcing a sudden collapse or a reformation.
And finally, wood. Wood feeds the fire.
Wood, incineration. This just suggests a massive depletion of resources to fuel all this growth. Wood is raw material, it's energy.
So uncontrollable wildfires.
Uncontrollable wildfires, widespread deforestation, and crucially, the depletion of energy and water needed to feed the technological fire of AI.
And on a human level.
Wood is growth and vitality. Its incineration translates to extreme burnout and exhaustion in human capital.
That is a remarkably detailed and, I have to say, concerning forecast just based on the energetics. But the sources all emphasize that 2026, the Fire Horse, is only the opening act. It kicks off a larger sequence.
Absolutely. We have to understand the context of the Red Goat disaster prophecy. The Bingwu, the fire horse of 2026, is immediately followed by Dingwei, the fire goat, in 2027.
And the goat way is also associated with fire.
It's an earth branch containing fire, so it creates a consecutive pairing of 2 intense fire years.
And history suggests this specific pairing, fire horse followed by fire goat, often signals a profound structural breakdown.
The most famous precedent is the Jinkang incident of 1126 to 1127. That exact fire horse fire goat sequence marked the catastrophic end of the Northern Song dynasty.
Their capital was sacked, the imperial court captured.
It was a total structural regime collapse. So the implication for you, the listener, is that 2026 is the ignition point. It's the spark that releases the pressure and starts the severing.
But the crisis matures and the consequences become locked in during 2027.
Exactly. We are looking at a 2-year epoch of volatility.
Okay, so if the metaphysical forecast of Bingwu seems a bit abstract, we can now transition to some hard anthropological evidence. If you want proof that these cycles can impact society in profoundly measurable ways, you just have to look at Japan during the last fire horse recurrence. 1966.
This specific chapter is one of the most compelling pieces of sociological research we found. The recurrence of the fire horse, which is known as Hinoeuma in Japanese, caused a profound demographic shock.
One that you can still track statistically decades later.
You can see the notch in the population pyramid today.
And when you say profound, we have to look at the numbers. Listen to these data points. In 1966, the number of births in Japan plummeted.
By approximately 26% compared to the year before. The crude birth rate dropped from 18.5 per 1,000 in 1965 to just 14.5 in 1966.
Wow, that's a huge drop.
It was an immense voluntary societal action. It resulted in over 400,000 fewer total births that year.
And this wasn't driven by war or famine or economic depression.
No, it was driven purely by a deep-seated cultural superstition. I mean, just imagine the logistics of delaying or preventing 400,000 births over a 12-month period.
So what was the core of this extreme fear? Why was this 1 year, specifically for female children, so stigmatized?
The fear is rooted deep in the Edo period. The popular belief was that women born in a fire horse year would be undomesticatable.
Undomesticatable.
They would possess a fierce, headstrong, unmanageable temperament. And crucially, the excess yang energy of the fire horse year was seen as completely incompatible with the traditional yin constitution expected of a Japanese woman.
And this led to the prophecy that
they would bring an early death to their future husbands, all because of their destructive internal fire.
So a fire horse daughter was basically a guaranteed pariah, destined to disrupt the family, the whole patriarchy.
Exactly. And the statistical evidence shows that people went to extreme systematic lengths to avoid this fate.
So
we analyzed the detailed birth data, and it shows a significant anomalous spike in the ratio of male births to female births in 1966.
But nature dictates a pretty stable sex ratio, so that distortion suggests intervention.
It has to.
But this is 1966. This is before modern sex-selective technology was widely available, so how did parents manage that statistical feat?
This points to what sociologists call paper infanticide.
Paper infanticide.
The falsification of official government birth records. Parents who were desperate to spare their daughters the stigma of being a fire horse woman would register girls born in, say, November, December of 66 as being born in January of 67, the year of the goat.
Or they'd push a birth in early 66 back to late 65.
Exactly. They were literally trying to cheat the zodiac to avoid cultural censure and to make sure their daughters were marriageable.
That's astonishing. It reflects such an intense level of social coordination and fear, and the 66 recurrence also intersected with modernity in a really stark and sobering way.
It did, and this is where the cultural fear had a direct, measurable impact on state policy effectiveness. The 1966 fire horse year coincided with the legality and availability of induced abortion under Japan's eugenic protection law, and the data shows a sharp, identifiable rise in the induced abortion rate during 1966. Couples were opting to terminate pregnancies wholesale rather than risk the immense social hardship of having a fire horse daughter.
Especially when they couldn't know the sex of the fetus early on.
Exactly.
This sounds like a pure case of cultural belief, just overriding every other biological and economic drive. But there's a counter-argument that complicates this simple narrative of terror, right? From the sociologist 𝐏𝐃𝐂𝐀𝐒.
Right. Kikawa's interpretation is really nuanced and important. He argues the drop wasn't solely due to superstitious terror.
So what else was at play?
He says the fire horse year acted as a rationalized social nudge. The mid-1960s was a period of rapid industrialization and social transition in Japan. Couples were already moving towards smaller nuclear families. They were already seeking methods of fertility control.
So the superstition provided a socially acceptable excuse for behavior that was already trending.
Precisely. It created a cultural permission structure. It allowed couples to delay childbearing or limit their family size, aligning that traditional compelling belief, the need to avoid the fire horse, with the modern trend of family planning.
So the superstition wasn't the sole cause, but it was the highly effective, emotionally charged mechanism for this radical collective action.
The sheer scale of that action just demonstrates the power of a culturally resonant narrative.
And to really grasp why this superstition held so much power, we have to understand the source of the fire itself, the founding myth. The story of the fire horsewoman, 𝐏𝐻𝐃𝐂𝐀𝐒.
It's a powerful, tragic narrative. It's rooted in the 1666 fire horse year. Oshichi was the daughter of greengrocer in Edo.
The old name for Tokyo.
Right. And the sources detail that in 1682, during the horrific Great Tenno Fire that swept through Edo, her family sought refuge in a local temple.
And it was there, amidst all that chaos, that she fell in love.
Desperately in love with a young temple acolyte. The fire brought them together. But when the destruction passed and her family returned to their rebuilt home, she was cut off from him.
By strict social constraints, curfews, distance.
So in an act of pure, desperate, elemental passion, an act that just perfectly defines the reckless impulse of the fire horse, she reasoned that if she simply started another fire,
her family would be forced back to the temple.
And she would be reunited with her lover. The sources say she took a bundle of straw and set a small fire. She was caught almost immediately.
And the tragic conclusion.
She was brought to trial. The only possible mercy for capital punishment for arson was reserved for girls under the age of 15.
And when they asked her age?
She truthfully admitted she was 16. She had just passed the threshold for leniency, and she was subsequently burned at the stake.
The ultimate fate for the woman who caused a conflagration. It's a profound feedback loop.
It is. And this story was immediately immortalized in Bunraku and Kabuki theater, which just solidified her as the ultimate archetype of the fire horsewoman.
A symbol of passion leading to madness.
To destruction. A willingness to burn down society represented by the city of Edo for an emotional desire. She embodied that destructive yang energy.
Making her the direct antithesis of the expected societal ideal.
And it's the persistence of that specific narrative that led 400,000 couples 300 years later, to radically change their biological behavior.
The story of Oshichi in the 1966 cohort, that shows us the fear of the fire horse. Now let's look at how history shows us its fury.
Right.
We can take the principles of the fire horse, the explosion, the severance, the conflagration, and apply them to the global record. If this archetype really is an algorithm of disruption, we should see it in the previous cycles.
And we find it, clearly, in 1906 and 1846.
Let's start with 1906, the Earth on fire. Our sources describe this cycle as manifesting as literal seismic and social eruptions, forces released from below the surface due to immense, uncontrollable pressure.
What's fascinating is how perfectly the signature event of 1906 aligns with the Bing-Wu elements.
It's almost a cosmic joke.
It really is. The quintessential event was the San Francisco earthquake and fire of April 1906. You have the violent movement, the galloping horse of the earthquake, a sudden, powerful structural force.
Immediately followed by the massive conflagration, the fire.
A fire that consumed 80% of the wooden city. The sources all describe the city being destroyed not just by the tremor, but by the unchecked subsequent fire. A literal embodiment of the elemental energy.
And the fire wasn't just on the surface in the U.S. Europe saw a disaster with a really resonant elemental cause, but this one occurred deep underground.
That's the Courrières mine disaster in France. Europe's worst mining disaster killed 1,099 miners. The cause?
Coal dust explosion.
A fire underground. It reinforces this theme that the excessive pressure of the fire horse year manifests in eruptions of heat, whether it's tectonic or industrial pressure building in the dark. The energy has to be released explosively.
But the social fires were just as potent as the physical ones. We saw the status quo being violently consumed by revolutionary fervor across the globe.
The Yang bleed was cutting right through social contracts. In Russia, the peasant uprising of 1906, often called the Agrarian Revolution, it was characterized by immense violence, specifically the burning of manor houses.
Right.
Historical reports describe vast stretches of the Russian night sky just illuminated by the burning estates of the aristocracy. It's the rage of the proletariat manifesting as literal fire consuming the elite.
The wood of the manor houses feeding the fire of the revolution.
Precisely. And this revolutionary fire, it jumped borders.
Where else?
In Iran, the Persian constitutional revolution began. It was driven by modernization and a need to expose the corruption of the monarchy. That's Bing, the sun, illumination exposing secrets.
A political fire.
That successfully forced the ruling Shah to sign a decree establishing a parliament. Meanwhile, far to the south in South Africa, the Zulu Bambatha Rebellion, a violent, organized resistance against crushing British colonial extraction, was brutally crushed in a fiery and bloody campaign.
So the insight from 1906, then, is that it demonstrates this uncontrollable aspect, where immense pressure, whether it's social or tectonic, it just can't be contained, and it has to be released explosively through heat and destruction.
Now let's move back another 60 years to 1846. Here, the fire horse manifests through slightly different but equally volatile themes: expansion, severance, and catastrophic resource failure.
This is the yang blade concept in its purest form.
The aggressive cutting away of the old?
The physical expansion of territories was driven by the U.S. concept of manifest destiny.
Exactly. The Mexican-American War began in 1846. It was an aggressive military movement, the galloping horse of conquest, driven by a fiery, expansive national ideology.
And critically, this war led to the definitive severance of vast territories.
California, Texas, much of the Southwest, all severed from Mexico. The map of North America was violently redrawn, and that border was permanently severed.
Domestically, you see that same theme of internal severance and violence, mirroring the peasant uprisings of 1906.
This is the truly grim case of the Galician slaughter in Austrian-occupied Poland. This wasn't a standard revolt. It was a peasant uprising that quickly became a systematic massacre of the nobility, the robacha.
And what drove it?
Grievances, Austrian manipulation.
Yeah.
But the peasants burned manor houses and, as the Yang Blade implies, carried out horrifying acts of severance, including ritualistic violence against aristocrats.
The pattern holds. The lower orders consume the elite with fire and violence during this cycle.
It does. But perhaps the most enduring and catastrophic expression of elemental failure in 1846 was the Great Famine.
The Great Hunger in Ireland.
This marked the absolute nadir of the potato blight. And the blight itself acted as a biological fire, just rapidly destroying the staple crop. Metaphysically, it represents the catastrophic failure of the earth, the crops, to contain this destructive fire blight.
The result was mass death, mass emigration, and the severance of the population from their homeland.
It highlights the resource vulnerability when fire dominates. The structure needed to sustain life, food, earth, water, it fails under that heat stress.
We even find a terrible, concentrated microcosm of this severance and consumption in the infamous tale of the Donner Party.
Yes. Trapped by winter in the Sierras, that group descended into desperation and cannibalism, a primal, consuming fire of survival instinct.
It's a small, terrible example.
But it captures the theme of consumption, structural failure, and the severance of humanity under extreme pressure that defined the entire year of 1846.
So the consistent insight here is that the fire horse doesn't just disrupt, it violently reshapes. It uses fire and sharp action to clear the board, whether that's burning a city, starting a war, or collapsing a food supply. Okay, before we jump into the technological and climate forecasts for 2026, I think it's vital that we understand the human face of this energy.
Yes.
If the fire horse is truly about disruption and a refusal to fit existing boundaries, we should see those traits magnified in the biographies of those born in 1966.
This is part 4, the disruptors. We're looking at individuals who are not just successful, but volatile, rebellious, and pioneering. They embody that Bing-Wu energy.
And let's start with a person who just perfectly embodied the Yaya Oshichi archetype in the modern era. Sinead O'Connor, born in 1966.
O'Connor was the quintessential fire horse woman. Her life was defined by this immense internal fire and a vehement refusal to conform to any boundary.
Be it the music industry's demands or
patriarchal religious institutions. She was always on the attack.
And her most famous act, tearing up a picture of Pope John Paul II on live U.S. television in 1992, that was an act of explicit symbolic arson against a powerful institution.
It was an incredible public severance. She knew the consequences. It effectively burned her commercial career to the ground. But she did it for a moral, emotional cause she passionately believed in.
She embodied the spirit of Oshichi, willing to destroy structures.
Her own career, the network's comfort, for a deeper emotional or ideological need. She was raw, unfiltered, and volatile, tracking that boom and bust energy of the sign perfectly. Her volatility often led to confrontation, exposure, that's Bing, and necessary destruction.
Then you have the physical, raw embodiment of Yang fire aggression, Mike Tyson, also born in 1966.
Tyson's boxing style was explosive, terrifying, and overwhelming. Pure, unconstrained firepower.
And his career arc is a masterclass in firehorse energy.
Absolutely. Meteoric rise, the boom, followed by spectacular collapse, the bust and disgrace, followed by a complete reinvention.
And his volatility wasn't just in the ring.
No, his personal life was marked by extreme highs and lows, reckless action, the Yang blade, and huge philosophical shifts. He even uses language that's congruent with the elemental system. He once described his transformation as, "I am a vessel of fire," and his younger self as filth that had to be forged into a weapon.
Fire conquering metal through intense heat.
Exactly.
And finally, a different kind of Bing Sun intensity captured by the celebrity chef and entrepreneur, Gordon Ramsay.
Ramsay's public persona is built on literal heat as a chef and figurative rage. He is famous for his explosive, fiery temper tantrums and brutal, unforgiving honesty.
That's the Bing, the sun, energy of illumination, exposing incompetence for all the world to see.
Right. But the Fire Horse is also about speed and action. Ramsay's success wasn't just television. It was his relentless entrepreneurial expansion. Rapidly launching restaurants across continents, constantly in motion, mirroring the galloping horse.
His intensity just burns up his environment, his staff, his competitors.
But it also drives incredible rapid growth.
So the core takeaway here is clear. The firehorse individual is fundamentally a disruptor. They don't maintain existing structures. They either expand them with sheer force of will, or they deliberately destroy them.
They act as the spiritual engine for the structural shifts we're about to forecast.
Which provides the perfect bridge to our final section. The convergence of the metaphysical with the material forecast for 2026.
So now we apply the Firehorse archetype to the technological, climatic, and geopolitical landscapes of 2026.
Okay.
If fire equals intelligence, acceleration, and visible output, then 2026 is poised to be the year of the AI ignition. This is the first of the three major fires we anticipate.
And the metabolic metaphor of fire is shockingly literal here, because AI is a massive engine of consumption that generates immense heat.
And it requires the very element that 2026 is deficient in, water.
Right.
Precisely. Large language models, generative AI systems, they're not ethereal. They're metabolic engines. They consume vast amounts of electricity and, crucially, water for cooling.
So since the 2026 chart is water deficient, this aligns metaphysically with the projected energy and cooling crunch for these mega data centers.
The fire of AI is literally burning up global water resources.
We're talking about tangible strains on infrastructure by 2026.
Absolutely. The IEA, the International Energy Agency, forecasts that the demand for power to fuel AI clusters will strain national grids, potentially leading to localized blackouts or what the industry is calling compute rationing.
Oh.
They predict AI electricity consumption could rival that of mid-sized nations like Japan or Sweden by the 2026-2030 timeframe. The wood is being incinerated rapidly to feed this technological fire.
And this timeline is also critical because it aligns with the consensus window for a major leap in AGI capability, according to leading figures in the field.
Yes, prominent AI forecasters have pinpointed 2026-2027 as a critical window for autonomous breakthroughs. Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, suggests powerful AI systems capable of fully autonomous research and development could emerge by late 2026 or early 2027.
And note again how that maps almost perfectly onto the transition point to the red goat year, 2027, which is historically associated with crisis maturity.
It's a very tight alignment. And the warnings from the foundational figures, like Geoffrey Hinton, are equally stark about the nature of this change.
What's he saying?
Hinton warns that AI capabilities are doubling every 7 months. By 2026, he predicts that AI could possess reasoning capabilities that challenge human control, leading to the large-scale displacement of routine white-collar work.
The Yang blade at work. The swift, aggressive severance of the existing human-centric labor market.
It is, and the Firehorse is the engine of speed and action, not contemplation.
So the transition from passive, reactive chatbots to aggressive, active AI agents, that aligns perfectly.
The shift will be complete by 2026. AI agents will be acting proactively, executing strategies, generating complex outputs independently. This agentic behavior mirrors the horse's trait of constant forward momentum.
But strategically, this convergence of hype, valuation, and excessive consumption without sufficient profitability or wisdom. That's the water element again. It suggests a correction is coming.
Unnecessary correction.
So the forecast is for an AI bubble burst or a massive reality check around 2026.
That is the financial prediction drawn from this confluence of energy. Excessive fire, the hype suggests a severe market correction or a collapse of major cash-burning AI startups.
It would parallel the necessary clearing fire of the 1906 San Francisco event, a structural disaster that clears the debris before stable construction can begin.
The Yang blade will sever those companies that lack fundamental structural integrity, the metal. The second fire is the celestial fire of climate and solar activity, and this is the most literal synchronization.
Because 2026 is predicted to be a year of extreme heat driven by two complementary forces.
Human activity and the sun itself.
We're entering the peak intensity of the sun's natural cycle.
Exactly. We have to look at solar cycle 25. The sun follows an 11-year cycle of activity, and solar cycle 25 is predicted to reach its maximum intensity between late 2024 and early 2026.
A solar max and a fire horse year. That is a potent double alignment of celestial fire.
It is. And this means increased sunspots and, critically, a higher potential for coronal mass ejections, CMEs, which pose a direct physical threat to our digital global infrastructure.
The so-called internet apocalypse threat.
Scientists warn that the probability of a Carrington-class event, a massive solar storm capable of knocking out global communications, GPS, the entire internet, it peaks during the solar maximum.
And by 2026, our society is completely reliant on that electric noosphere.
A disruptive CME would be the ultimate fire horse event, an act of massive celestial arson burning down our digital infrastructure and causing a profound, sudden severance from modernity.
I sometimes wonder how a solar event, something so cosmic, could be more devastating than a geopolitical crisis.
Because a geopolitical crisis is regional. It's often reversible. A global CME is instant, ubiquitous, and systemic.
Right.
Imagine the water deficiency we discussed, the breakdown of logistics and flow, compounded by the inability to track shipping, execute financial transfers, or communicate globally. It's a systemic collapse of the circulatory system of the global economy, directly caused by fire.
And the terrestrial heat will only amplify this elemental pressure.
The UK Met Office predicts that 2026 will be one of the hottest years on record globally, potentially breaching the critical 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold.
And the Bingwu combination suggests massive heat waves, severe droughts.
And the potential for increased volcanic eruptions as that heat penetrates the Earth's structure.
And with the chart's lack of water, that means uncontrollable wildfires consuming the wood element.
We forecast an extremely high risk of catastrophic, continent-spanning wildfires, especially in the Northern Hemisphere summers. Furthermore, we can tie this back to the 1846 famine.
How so?
Just as the potato blight caused resource failure there, 2026 faces severe agricultural risks from heat stress and water scarcity. This leads to the defining economic concept for the year: heatflation.
Heatflation. Let's elaborate on that. What are the specific mechanisms?
Heatflation is the economic disruption caused by extreme temperatures. It manifests in two key ways. First, massive crop loss. Heat stress drastically reduces yields in staple crops. That's earth and wood failure.
Okay. And second?
Reduced labor productivity. When temperatures hit critical thresholds, outdoor labor construction, agriculture, logistics, it slows down or it halts entirely.
Less product and less efficient labor drive up the cost of everything,
creating a persistent, fire-driven inflation that can't be solved by central banks alone. The third fire is societal and economic volatility. The fire horse mood is historically one of rebellion, polarization, and the breaking of boundaries. The social contract gets burned and rewritten.
And risk analysis firms already anticipate that civil unrest will intensify in 2026, driven by economic volatility and the polarization that Bing illumination makes so visible.
The fire horse energy supports fast-spreading, spontaneous outbursts of public anger, flash protests and riots, much like the peasant uprisings of 1906.
Because everything is visible.
Everything is visible, grievances are magnified, and the speed of communication, the horse, allows anger to propagate globally almost instantly.
And the U.S. is facing a major internal stress test right in the middle of this cycle.
In 2026, the United States celebrates its 250th anniversary, the semi-quincentennial.
An anniversary that should unite.
It should. But given the Firehorse's nature of exposing secrets and driving conflict, this celebration is likely to be marred by intense, divisive, and conflicting narratives about the nation's history and future.
And the midterms.
Electorates will be highly volatile and anti-incumbent, treating the midterms as a fiery, aggressive referendum on the political status quo. The Yang blade cuts deep into the national identity.
And then there's the specter of that red goat transition in 2027, which speaks to large-scale geopolitical stability.
Historically, the Fire-Horse-Fire-Goat sequence signals major regime collapse or structural geopolitical shifts, much like the fall of the Northern Song dynasty.
Which aligns with modern geopolitical forecasting.
It does. They anticipate shifting alliances, intensified trade wars, that's fire melting metal, and intensified gray zone conflicts in the mid-2020s. The pressure just becomes too great for existing political structures to contain the heat, and something breaks irreversibly.
So let's turn to the broader economy. If the system is overheating, what are the mainstream analysts predicting for overall volatility?
Analysts from major firms like J.P. Morgan see a substantial 35–50% probability of recession by 2026, driven by sustained inflation and the potential collapse of overvalued tech sectors.
The FIRE economy is inherently one of high consumption and speculative inflation.
And if the AI bubble bursts, the crash will be severe because the market lacks the cooling wisdom, the water to execute a soft landing.
But amid all this structural stress and meltdown, there's one fascinating counter-prediction regarding specific assets.
Yes. While many assets decline, metaphysical forecasters predict a powerful boom in gold and silver prices.
Why?
Because, in the elemental system, fire forges metal. Fire reduces the volume and impurities of metal, making it more valuable and concentrated. And what's fascinating is that financial analysts independently corroborate this elemental prediction.
How do they corroborate the idea that fire will forge metal?
They cite soaring industrial demand for silver, specifically, which is critical in both AI infrastructure and green energy technology. Forecasts indicate a major supply deficit for silver peaking precisely around 2026.
So the world's shift to a new high-tech, high-consumption economy requires massive physical resource inputs.
The metal, driving up the cost of these forged assets regardless of recession fears. The fire of AI and green tech is literally demanding the metal.
We have covered a monumental amount of ground today. From the profound sociological shock of 1966 Japan to the technological inflection point of AGI emergence. What is the final synthesis of this blaze?
2026 is not just another year. It is a convergence point where the metaphysical cycles align with material trends, and the year will be defined by the elemental dominance of fire.
Literal heat.
Literal heat, the metabolic energy consumption of AI, and the metaphorical fire of revolutionary structural change. It is a year that demands action and rejects stasis.
So what are the 3 key takeaways for our listener who wants to apply this synthesized knowledge as they navigate 2026?
First, the lesson of 1966. Cultural narratives are material forces.
Right.
Just as the belief in the Firehorse empty Japanese nurseries, the current narratives of AI inevitability or climate doom will shape economic behavior, investment, and policy in 2026. Do not underestimate the power of a resonant collective narrative to drive measurable, radical action.
Second, the lesson from 1906 and 1846. Firehorse years are engines of history that test structural integrity.
They do not maintain the status quo. They transform it through violence and heat. If something is fundamentally flawed, a political alliance, a tech valuation, a piece of infrastructure, the Yang blade will sever it.
We must anticipate war, revolution, or natural disaster to be the catalysts for this transformation.
And third, the 2026 outlook. Prepare for the Yang blade, sudden, sharp, and irreversible changes. Technologically, anticipate a melt-up in capability followed by market instability. Environmentally, expect record heat and celestial interference from the sun. Socially, brace for a volatile rejection of the status quo driven by conflict and flash protests.
The Firehorse burns away the old growth and forces us all into a new era. The danger is getting caught in the flames, but the opportunity, as always, lies in what grows in the ash.
Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you to mull over as you conclude this deep dive. If the Firehorse is the engine of history, and it requires the status quo to be incinerated for necessary new growth, what necessary part of modern global structure, political, digital, or financial, is most fundamentally overdue to be burned away and irreversibly severed in 2026?
That is something to keep in mind as we begin to navigate the approaching year of the Firehorse. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.